Happy Earth Day, everybody. 2021. I have a presentation of pictures I've taken of two water bears together. Of the March 10th, 2021 night sky. And a four-leafer in my big backyard. And another four-leafer that went into my flatbread. With a four-leafer that had heart-shaped leaves. And a mess of four-leafers in their natural habitat. And the sum of four-leafers, five-leafers, six-leafers, and one seven-leafer. And there's Angelonia and my bluebird bonking himself in the front window, defending its territory over and over and over again. So if you want to study male bluebird territoriality, here you go. All he sees is a reflection, and I had the cannon set up so that he couldn't see me from far back. And I just clicked away, picked the best ones. But yep, that's a bluebird acting territorial. There you go. Now there's a blue jay checking out the feeding area underneath the maple tree. And the female bluebird just hanging out and eating out of a log suet feeder that I made. And there she is on the front porch guarding her nest. And there's her mate holding court and preening. And there they both are. And that's a Burford holly over at Chris and Carol's place on Overlook. And that's a butterfly weed just breaking through the ground in my big front yard. And a camellia at Jane's house. And there's a female cardinal with the male watching on in the background. And then a male cardinal on the window suet feeder. And that's a Carolina jasmine on the moon gate. And the Carolina wren picking up scraps in my big backyard on the deck. This new flower to my rock garden is called cat's pajamas. And this is Ceratodon purpureus, which is a granite outcrop plant. And there's cherry blossoms and more cherry blossoms. And my neighbor's beautiful cherry trees. And chickweed growing along my trail. Under the microscope, this is a protist called Closterium. And this is a picture of clover chickweed with an aphid right in the middle. And there's some different kinds of clovers. And that's my coral honeysuckle near the well cap. And a crabapple that's in bloom that Miss Jo gave me. And this is a crescent butterfly that I had Bug Guide identify at one point. And a crimson fire bush at the neighbor's. And this is it close up for detail. This is crimson fire Loropetalum. Same species, and there's a crow in my big front yard. And those are some daffodils that bloomed fairly early on in the spring. And these are ones that I picked just recently. And here's some daffodils in Greenville with some vetch growing up in between them. And notorious dandelions in the lawn. and dianthus that I planted near my rock garden, along with monarch butterfly on another dianthus. And there's a neighbor's dogwood, and there's the dogwood up close, and another view. And this is the dogwood that's growing down by the little river. That's looking down the little river, and that's looking up the little river. And there is a downy female at my suet feeder on the window. You can tell she has no red spot on the back of her head, whereas her mate, the male, does. This is elderberry right now in the spring, beginning to put out its big white flower plume, and elf orpine in the granite outcrop. This is my fern gully with my pagoda, and that's looking down my trail with ferns that I got from Jane, and fire spinners, which are kind of like rock portulaca. And my favorite shrub in my front yard, the flame azalea, just beginning to bud out, and then budding out a little more. And there's a close-up with the Japanese maple behind it. And the gladiolas are going to come up nearby. And I made some flatbread with some of the plants in my big backyard, and rolled it up and pressed it out and heated it. And by golly, it turned out to be the best flatbread I'd ever made. And there's some fleabane at the neighbor's. And some of those flowers I picked, took a picture of on my deck. And our forsythia, the one that bloomed the best this year. And my Frisco, after he's eating pistachios. And that's a frontonia under the microscope that was very active. And geranium, chickweed, henbit, clover, and a spider and a fly. And this turns out to be a giant leopard moth caterpillar. And Gliotrichia, which is a type of cyanobacteria. Goldfinch, a male. And my little mini granite outcrop display. And the grape hyacinths in my front yard before the Japanese magnolia bloomed. And these are pictures that we took in Greenville. And Grimmia moss on granite on one of our afternoon drives. And my hawthorn tree is in bloom. I treated it for fungus. And that's henbit in the lawn. And a honeybee pollinating the January honeysuckle. And that's a house centipede in the drain of our big tub. And a hyacinth bulb I planted last fall. And these are wood hyacinths, which are a little different. And there are 3 of those hyacinths that I planted from big full bloom nursery. And that's Indian hawthorn that's growing in our front yard, and an iris that I transplanted. And that one's down by the culvert in the mailbox, and more irises blooming in my front yard. Here's a bouquet of January honeysuckle, and January honeysuckle pollen under high power. And there's a ladybug on a piece of catchweed that I captured. And there's a ladybug larvae on a violet leaf. And one decided to hitchhike on my arm. And there's a ladybug that was tending my wild rose that's going to bloom soon. And the Lenten rose that I got from Mary Glenn. And lobelia that I planted this year. It's already attracted many pollinators. A mahonia that's producing Oregon grapes, and my mockingbird through the window, checking out and making sure it's safe. And I love the way the mockingbird drinks out of the pond water, and you can see it dribble down its throat. And that was after a storm. And there it is on the apex of the roof, just singing its heart out. And I saw a monarch in early April. And we went to Montalucci Winery. And here's another moth I plan on asking Bug Guide to identify for me. But I haven't done that yet. And another small moth on the elderberry that might be a virgin moth. And that's some kind of looper moth. And that was in front of Northeast Georgia Medical buildings. And there's a nuthatch. They love the log suet feeders. And those are some beautiful pansies that have the funny looking blech faces in front of Jane's house. And my pride and joy this year, I'm hoping I will get my first crop of real peaches. So I've already fertilized and fungicided and plan to kill all the Japanese beetles. This is a Pieris formosa at Jane's house. And I got to see a pileated woodpecker fly over my head and land in my neighbor's yard, and I just barely got pictures. But boy, did that woodpecker make some noise. Polytrichum is one of my favorite mosses. And here it is at the farm with some lichens on a dead log. And in my poplar tree, I had a bluebird singing with a red-winged blackbird. So I played with my prisms and took rainbow pictures. And picked my pussy willows before they bloomed. And got pictures of the red-bellied woodpecker. This is the male, whose whole head is got a swath of red all the way down the back of his neck. And that's the redbud tree in bloom. And it has these neat little balls of buds on the stems, not at the branches. And that was a reddish speckled dart moth in the house. And Richard posing in my flower bed. And a robin coming up closer than ever in my big backyard than I've ever seen. And that was the rock with daffodils near the flame azalea. And a rock wall, I forget where I took that one. But this one was at the G&P. And I used rock walls as fill patterns for gates and fences and things. And this is salvia in between our house and the neighbors. And this is Siddeley's lair under the Japanese maple. And near my rock, I saw a skink without a tail. These are snowdrops that I got from 210 South Smith Street. And this is sorrel, which you can eat. Tastes like green apples. And there are 3 types of speedwell in my big backyard. And this one is called Time Speedwell. And there was a tiny little spider and a sunflower seed on the driveway. And that was one of my homegrown spinach side dish dinners. I also used spinach in making my famous omelets with cilantro salsa. And at first I sauteed the spinach, but this time I just laid the spinach out raw, clean and raw. And there's our neighborhood white squirrel. And there's my neighborhood pesky squirrel. And a swamp lily that I transferred from the Ogeechee swamp to the swamp in my big backyard. And that's a new plant that I planted under the maple rock called sweet woodruff and sycamore bark. That is a wonderful pattern that I took in Greenville. And there's a whole mess of tadpoles on a granite outcrop, and Thumper, the new bunny, in Grant's hands. And the tufted titmouse enjoying the suet feeder on the window. And that's one we rescued after it crashed in the window. And there's a rare picture of a towhee up close. And a tulip from on top. I had 10 tulip bulbs come up. I was so proud. And then there was the turkey that came visiting. Turkey lurkey, we call her. And a vetch blossom out back. And violets. Violets, which all the parts of a violet plant can be eaten. I put flowers in my flatbread. Violet tubers are no substitute for Jerusalem artichokes. I learned that 2 of my neighbors have shrubs called wigella, which is beautiful and fragrant, pointed out to me by my next door neighbors. And so I have several pictures of that. And I have one wild indigo plant and one woodchuck. There you go.